is wearing a pair of shoes, the most important thing is faith. As a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. As is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. And faith is the root of all. If one has faith, one has nothing to fear. A devotee. Sir, is it necessary to have a guru? Master. Yes, many need a guru, but a man must have faith in the guru's words. He succeeds in spiritual life by looking on his guru as God himself. Therefore, the Vaishnavas speak of Guru, Krishna, and Vaishnava. One should constantly repeat the name of God. The name of God is highly effective in the Kali Yuga. The practice of yoga is not possible in this age, for the life of a man depends on food. Clap your hands while repeating God's name, and the birds of your sin will fly away. One should always seek the company of holy men. The nearer you approach the Ganges, the cooler the breeze will feel. Again, the nearer you go to a fire, the hotter the air will feel. But one cannot achieve anything through laziness and procrastination. People who desire worldly enjoyment say about spiritual progress, well, it'll happen in time. We shall realize God some time or another. I said to Keshab Sen, when a father sees that his son has become restless for his inheritance, he gives him his share of the property even 3 years before the legal time. A mother keeps on cooking while a baby is in bed sucking its toy, but when it throws the toy away and cries for her, she puts down the rice pot and takes the baby into her arms and nurses it. I said all this to Keshab. It is said that in the Kali Yuga, if a man can weep for God one day and one night, he sees him.
Okay. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Iresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman, time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Satyena. Om Satyena Labhyastapasa Yesatma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayohi Shubraha Yam Pashanti Atayaha Kshinadoshaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self within, is realized by continence, moderation, austerity, knowledge, and veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it naturally, existing everywhere, even here in this very body. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidveshovahai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Good morning and welcome to SRV Associations, our Portland, Oregon chapter. We also have one in San Francisco where we broadcasted to you, the live streaming audience, and to the San Francisco Sangha last week. And next weekend we will not be live streaming because of our Zen, Buddhist, and Advaita Vedanta retreat on the Columbia River Gorge. But the following weekend here in Portland we will be also live streaming and holding classes here at the ashram in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which is our subject today. And I want to welcome the Hawaii Sangha, who I know are all sitting around one single computer. Last night they attended the ashram, had their chanting session, and then meditated this morning at 6 a.m. together, had breakfast, and are now tuning in to the class from the Honaka'a ashram on the Hamakua coast of the Big Island of Hawaii, where we keep a small ashram. So all of them are tuning in, and as are students on the East Coast, I hope, and some in India if the time element is right. Otherwise, these classes can be looked at after they're over. And they don't have to be seen live stream, but you can download them or look at them on the computer. Such is the modern technology that it puts us all in one single moment, which is very much like reality in one single moment. Now, yesterday we celebrated Shankara's birthday. Next week, Friday, I'm calling it Black Friday because we're going to be worshiping Lord Buddha in the Zen tradition, and they wear black and gray quite often. So that's on the full moon, which is coming next Friday. He was the thrice blessed one, born on full moon, got his enlightenment on a full moon, and passed into Mahanirvana on a full moon. So very much the consummate Indian seer and a living Buddha whose line of succession as far as Chan Zen and Japanese Zen goes is 52 generations long of living Buddhas all coming from that same source, which was called Shakyamuni in his physical body. And it is a member of the Shakya clan, just like Sri Ram, who left King Dasaratha's palace at a very young age and got sobered by seeing the suffering of the world. So too did Lord Buddha leave the palace of the Shakya clan and see the four signs. We were actually joking about that at breakfast yesterday. Four signs are the sick man, the old man, the burning corpse, and the monk, I think. Well, I saw the fifth sign the other day when I was driving in the car. It was the homeless person with a cell phone. So there's a sign of the times for you. And those who are seeking relief from the suffering of the world. And we are trying to provide that kind of solace, that kind of nepenthe, or salve, healing salve of Vedanta on the various wounds of upbringing, social convention, religious convention, and being stripped of or devoid of these wisdom teachings, or called Dharma, and having to live in an adharmic society and in adharmic conditions and still somehow maintain your center, your focus, and at least, as we just chanted, recognition of the self within. Basically, they say pratyabhigya, recognition, is half the battle. If you can just remember or hear of that Atman within, then you're halfway there to realizing, because it's so immediate, just like live streaming. It's immediately and in the very moment, and that's also the tradition of Zen. That's what the koan is for. You hear a koan, and immediately you're awakened because of the transmission that you're receiving there from the Roshi. And it's much the same in the Vedic tradition way in early times, when the student was very qualified, so qualified that just a few words might bring them to the brink of enlightenment like that, instead of a whole series of teachings that I have to give all of you of this age, which tries to penetrate through the various incrustations of Maya over and over. That is, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, some people's gold is buried in the very surface. You just brush away a few pebbles and there it is, shining. We see those people and we're quite amazed and quite inspired. Other people's gold's buried under mounds of earth, he said. You have to dig for a long time. Whatever the case may be, the good news, as far as Vedanta is concerned, is that that Atman is all-pervasive in everything, not even just in sentient things, but in insentient things too. It's the substratum of everything. All-pervasive and underlying substratum are two of the great proofs of the Purusha in ancient India under the Samkhya system. So yesterday we celebrated Shankaracharya, one of the great Advaitas, somewhere around 700 AD, and his teacher's teacher, Gaudapada, and Govindapada, between them, who was a manifestation of the father of yoga, Patanjali. Those three we look at and we see the very current manifestation of Advaita Vedanta in this age, followed up by beings like Swami Vivekananda and Ramana Maharshi and others who are holding that torch, that eternal torch, burning brightly, very high in this day and age for all of us to see and light our way with. So we had his day yesterday, and we looked at the sword of discrimination chart. We looked at the tree of samsara chart, and we looked at the 4 criterion for the teacher, and then the 7 levels of knowledge that the 4 criterion of teacher follow. 7 stages of knowledge. There are actually 14, but there are 7 lower knowledge, or ignorance actually. They're called Ajnana Bhumis. 7 lower stages of knowledge, which are a very interesting study because they show how a soul traces its way through ignorance, through Maya, to via its waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states, one of the key teachings in Advaita, and finds its way to this first stage, Subhecha it's called, of the 7 higher levels of knowledge, Jnana Bhumikas. So Ajnana Bhumikas, Jnana Bhumikas make up the 14 spheres of knowledge, which we tend to think of in the West as outward. But as you climb this ladder of 14 rungs, you might say, you find out that these stages of wisdom are actually, by using them, you're coming in contact with the kingdoms of heaven within, as Christ said. These are actually inner lands. The Buddhists call it the 10 bhumis, that is 10 lands of bodhisattva. So it's, in their way of thinking, also similar to the idea of Shankara's Jivan Mukta, or Jivan Mukti state. You come back to this world as after you get your enlightenment, and you still have more honing to do, but you're not honing your ignorance anymore. You're not making your life into a worse mess, or embroiling yourself deeper in Maya. Now you've found your way through Maya, and now you're beginning to penetrate and deepen your understanding. Deepen it so much that you can begin to share it with others, and you can begin to transmit it and teach it like my teacher did for us here in Portland in the 80s and 90s when we attended upon him, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, who was the last of 2 living devotees of Holy Mother. So we are very blessed here in Portland to have a direct disciple of Holy Mother living amongst us for so long. And thus the appearance of this ashram in his name, in his auspice really, under Sri Ramakrishna, under the umbrella of the Ramakrishna order where all of us learned. including myself, the present spiritual director of the SRV associations, had teachings from Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj and also Swami Nityaswarupananda, who is the other direct living disciple of Holy Mother. So we're very fortunate to be a splinter group, as they call it, or an offshoot, a branch of that tree that is maybe not so long-lived as the Shankara order, which has been there for many centuries, but is nonetheless, we call the new dispensation, or the recent manifestation via Swami Vivekananda. If you actually look at Shankara's life, lived 32 years, and Vivekananda's life lived 39 years, and you see the penetrations that they accomplished around the subcontinent, and then Swamiji's case being like Hanuman jumping the ocean and getting around the world to Europe and England and the United States, and you see the early attainment and the powerful gurus that these two beings have, very hard to separate them. You begin to think of them almost as the same emanation from one source, or different emanations from one source. We feel the same about Ramana Maharshi and Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Our founder actually had a picture on his library in New York, library wall, with Ramana Maharshi and Sri Ramakrishna in the same frame, side by side, and you'd look at them and you'd say, they look remarkably the same, and they act remarkably the same, and they're from that same cut of yogi and tantricist, with a little blending of the Vedanta in there. Well, Swami Vivekananda came here and really brought the Vedanta strong to us, and what was lying underneath that was the tantric element of India. That's something you have to dig for to find, and some people aren't so actuated towards it because it involves deities and God with form, and some people are not so warm to that anymore, partly because of the decline of religion, the religion of God with form. But the onslaught, or the forthcoming of non-duality amongst the people of the West is more notable. And we have this almost inbred tendency, samskara as they're called in India, to turn towards a formless reality. That is, okay, you've taught us for 2,000 years what the Son is like. Now let's see the Father. Well, you never talk about the Almighty Father. You're talking about the Son all the time. So, of course, in India, that problem was there in some ways. The decline of religion is there upon every darshana. Like Krishna is saying that right here in this picture, in this room. From age to age, I have to embody myself forth to resurrect the old dharma. I'm going to destroy those things which are not current, which are not applicable to the present age, and is going to bring out those elements which are, so that we are very clear. Clarity is very important to both Buddhism and Vedanta. Khyati, they call it in yoga. So yoga is also on board with that. So this need to keep ourselves on the cutting edge, today we call it Mother's Sword, and that's what we looked at yesterday, the sword of discrimination. Its edge, its hilt, its arc, its effect, how to use it. That's the sword of viveka, and of course that word, at least in Sanskrit, is familiar with us because Swami Vivekananda took that as his name when he came west. When he was wandering in India, he was calling himself Satchidananda, I think, and he wanted to call himself Ramakrishnananda, but one of the other boys selected that name, so Swamiji gave it up. And so when he came as Vivekananda, it was very apropos for us here, because we really do need to hone our view, our perspective. It's in accordance with the Eightfold Path, too, the Fourth Noble Truth of Buddhism, that we need to make thine eye single, as Christ said, and begin to clarify things that have become unclear over thousands of years of Christendom and more thousands of years of Judaism and also the Hinduism, which has declined so abruptly and brashly, the caste system and things that were once very much in order, which now have to be taken up and dusted off and looked at in a new way with a new eye. So we see that it's a very exciting age, the Kali Yuga. It's also a very dangerous age. But they say about it, that light shines best among the darkness. So if you have an age of ignorance like the Kali Yuga, then you have that much more opportunity, what to speak of incentive, to find your true nature and seek it out. So, as Zen Buddhist says, come out of the sky, you 500 cranes. So come down to earth with your master and realize yourself here. Somebody asked me on email a couple weeks back how to make their dreaming state lucid. And I said, that's simple. Make your waking state lucid. What do you think? You can control your dreams? Who can do that? Very few. They come and they go. You don't know where they come from sometimes and where they disappear to, sort of like life. So if you were to work on this level of consciousness, the waking state, and become dharmic and begin to live in subtle bliss, or do you think you'll have bad dreams anymore? Or do you think you'll be bereft of your deep sleep state? Somebody reported recently to me, I don't go into deep sleep, I just dream all night. So I said, well, then exercise real hard. Get some prana flowing through your blood. And then meditate very deeply. Those two sides of the coin will bring back your deep sleep state. And until you can meditate effectively, the deep sleep is it for you. And that's the only time you go formless that's doing you any good. And the problem with deep sleep is that you don't realize what you're experiencing there. That curtain of nescience, which we'll look at in a minute, has fallen down over your consciousness, and you're just enjoying ignorant bliss, if the dichotomy could be used. So to go into deep meditation is to simulate that deep sleep state and then begin to behold what is there. What you're seeing in deep sleep is actually called unmanifested prakriti, because the tip of the iceberg is all here, manifested prakriti: earth, air, fire, water, ether, mountains, trees, rivers, stars and planets and so forth, everything that is a part of the seen. But what you haven't seen yet is the unseen, everything that's a part of the mind back inside of you, which is the kingdoms of heaven within you. My Father's mansion has many chambers, that kind of unseen land. And then, of course, you haven't seen the seer itself yet. So you have the seen, the unseen, and the seer that you're looking at. You might as well be calling that nature, unmanifested nature, and you, the true self. It's a very valuable triputi to know about and to meditate upon. Of course, there's a fourth element you have to be careful about. It's called the obscene. You see, the seen, the unseen, the seer, and the obscene. Obscene, like war and so forth. Well, we know even contemporary rishis like Gandhiji has said that everyone's tired of war, which is the child of hatred. And there's no reason for it, really, to be here on earth. Yet there it was in Krishna's time and Arjuna's time, and a battlefield, and a whole host of karmas connected in it. I was telling someone yesterday who didn't understand why some of the more enlightened souls were on the adharmic side of the army. And I said, well, you'll have to read the Mahabharata, because the Gita is a part of the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata is showing you where all of these beings originated and their family lines and the karma that led them to be where they are. And then you'll understand that it isn't just black and white. It isn't just good and bad. That there are beings who come and fall into circumstances who are maybe even trying to help the unfortunate, so therefore they have to take on the mask of evil, have to take on the mask of adharma. So there's all sorts of possibilities in this world and all sorts of beings. That's what we need clarification on too. In the meantime, there's a teaching that Krishna gives about the divine and the demoniacal. It's a good chapter in the Gita to read. Those who are definitely manifesting the evil side of their nature and have forgotten the positive side. And then those seers, or Tantra puts it, Pasu, Virya, and Daiva, the animalistic people, and then the heroic people who are beginning to awaken and take on the responsibility of humanity and beginning to work for them. That's called Virya. It's like Hanuman. And then the Daiva, the seers. Those are warriors who have walked away from the battle and are directing it from outside, from some hilltop. They still have an interest in what goes on, but they're not investing their entire consciousness in that. They're keeping that sacrosanct, as Brahman is always sacrosanct and pure. So there are many ways to look at that. For instance, those parikramas, they're called, the 4 ways of dealing with the 4 kinds of people. You become very happy for those that are happy, and you become very compassionate for those who are sad, and you become reverent toward those who are enlightened, and you become indifferent to those who are evil. It's a nice way of putting it. You're indifferent. You can even take that teaching in a deeper level. You can say, well, Swamiji said, I love my God the good, I love my God the virtuous, I love my God the poor, I love my God the lowly and the suffering, but the real object of my love is my God the evil. So even if some of us have to remain indifferent to evil and not get mixed up there, we're not quite strong enough yet to keep our noses above water in that kind of a situation. But there are some people who will go toward that direction, because as I was saying yesterday, if you can transform an asura, you see, in like Prahlada, say, in the teaching, if you can make that transformation into a dharmic person or a realized soul, then you've done a major thing, and it makes a huge impression, not just in people's egos, like, oh wow, but in the whole collective consciousness begins to transform. They say, oh, look what's possible. An evil person got enlightened, and, well, I'm a good person. I should be able to get enlightened. See? And they all sit up and take notice. But if you transform a virtuous person to an enlightened person, it's like, ho-hum, an elephant walked in an ocean. There's no big effect there. But an elephant walks in a village pool, huge waves. So this indifference to evil is a good starting point until you strengthen yourself. In the meantime, you take refuge in holy company, don't you? And that's Guru, Dharma, Sangha, as Gyaneshri was reading from the Gospel just before. The Vaishnavas call it Krishna and Vaishnava and Gita. So basically, there's many Triputis out there we can study, and we did look at several of them yesterday. Since we have celebrated Shankara with 3 or 4 of his teachings out of the Viveka Chudamani yesterday, then today the class is called Upanishad, so we're going back to one of the Upanishads Shankara commented on, the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and congratulations to the Portland Sangha, those of you who are following closely, that you have made it almost through the 5th chapter, and there are 6 chapters. Back in San Francisco, we're still back, just finished the 2nd last week, and we're entering into the 3rd. So the last few chapters of, last few slokas of chapter 5 are what we're going to take up today. And the very first one of those, which is, if you want to look in your text, 7. This is chapter 5, sloka 7. Shvetashvatara, this great yogi, this great rishi, who, as I was describing yesterday, is surrounded by family and children and grandchildren who are all dharmic, if you can even imagine that in this age. See, and basically this age, the description would be more, doctors, lawyers, and evil children and thieves. That's what's surrounding you. That's a quote from Ramakrishna generally. But imagine a person who had raised his family up dharmically, giving them, the children at a very young age, these powerful teachings, and they grew up and got married and had grandchildren, and they gave those teachings and passed them on, and you had this family eventually, the old grandsire sitting there with nothing but dharma around him and teachings and illumination, and he was watching his kids grow. They didn't even need him anymore because he'd already provided everything for them, not just shelter and food and those things. Seek thee first the kingdom of heaven, and all else will be added unto thee. So it's what he did. And now he's sitting amongst hosts of illumined souls of his own bloodline. Now, he doesn't have to go looking for holy company. They're all there around him. All he has to do is shut his mouth in his old age and listen to his children teach and share with each other and share their experiences with him from an enlightened standpoint. we have to try and envision that in our meditations, what that's like again, and especially in America, because in India that still exists. You see dharmic families that are following that very deeply still. But in America, become very divorced from it, and matter has taken the place of spirit, and so we're beginning to worship mammon instead of God. So we can turn that tide, because as Vivekananda said, the sun may rise in the east, but it sets in the west. So he has made a very pregnant statement there about our opportunity to take these teachings that he has brought in 1893 to us and begin to work them into our thinking process and meditate on them. Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava, or if you want to put it in another way, it's Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Some of you know it that way. Either way you look at it, the three proofs of truth are there, and that way of proceeding with them. You start out hearing the truth, and then you take it inside and contemplate it, and then finally you realize it, and you live in it. Most people are into the problem of, here's my issues and problems, here's the solutions, and here's the relief I get from applying the solutions. And so they're going around in this round of issues, brooding, and solutions. They hear the teacher speak, and maybe 90% of it is true, and then the other 10% they have some issue with, so they worry about that, you see. And then they get into a tiff and a problem, and then they find a solution for that, however temporary, but that's just a tail end of the beginning of another set of issues that they're working their way into. The whole way out of the problem was to concentrate on the 90% that they agreed upon. See? And that's the proof of the scriptures. I just chanted it. Shruti Pranava, or Pramana, Shruti Pramana, it's the proof of the scriptures. So those teachings that are being given by seer and via the scriptures are the doorway out of ignorance. There's Ajnana and there's Jnana, but there's also Vijnana. So there's always a doorway out in a Triputi out of a duality. And if you know Triputis, then you can always affect the ultimate solution instead of getting involved in issues, problems, and solutions, and then this round of constant marching like that. You begin to contemplate the truth, and as Christ said, thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So contemplate that truth teaching. So let's try and do that with these slokas in the Upanishad today. This one says, as we said, number 7, starts in talking about the human soul, not the mind soul. The mind soul is that which comes from birth to growth to death and so forth, but the true soul, which is all pervasive and doesn't move. Subtle is the point of a goad, and pure, effulgent, and infinite like the sun. That one alone is seen assuming as another the size of a thumb, on account of the finiteness of the heart in which it appears, and associating itself with egoism and sankalpa, on account of limitations of the intellect. So that one shining Brahman, that one ultimate soul, gets manifested as living beings in the world, as we read in the Gospel yesterday morning. That's the qualified non-dual standpoint, Vishishta Advaita it's called. And it's the place where most people operate from, not yet understanding the Advaita and being sort of rather tired of the dualism level of things. They graduate to this qualified non-dual level where the watermelon and its seeds kind of idea. And the seed will give rise to more watermelons. So they're thinking of God as involved in the evolutionary process, in the birth and death process, which actually it never is. It's always just providing the substratum for it, while nature, manifested and unmanifested nature, go on and on producing forms in accordance with the participation of the human mind, which, as we were describing it yesterday, is individual, collective, and cosmic. The collective mind has immense power, by the way. You're talking about the congealing of human minds, ancestor minds, celestial minds, the minds of the deities, and the minds of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. All of that is part and parcel of the collective mind. So you have a lot of force there, and a lot of misidentification and proper identification with that collective mind. That is, its uses, proper and improper both. So you have what's called prarabdha, sanchita, and agami, the three kinds of karma coming from that collective mind: past, present, and future. So that's a lot to deal with, the collective mind. So this sloka is relating that one pure Brahman gets apparently modified. It's called vivarta or adhyasa, with the finite body-mind mechanism, identifies itself with the ego and begins the sankalpa process. So this is an old warhorse, I admit, and it's been showed many times to all of you, but it's always good to relook at. That is, basically, Vasishtha is rather seen as the father of the idea of sankalpa. Sankalpa, if you want the teaching at a cosmic level, is that everything is a projection of mind. And the Buddhists got a hold of this in a later age, and from Shakyamuni down to Nagarjuna and down to Zen Buddhism, is looking at this as one of the main precepts of Buddhism, that everything is a manifestation of mind. In fact, that's one of the main sutras in the Pragyaparamita Sutta of the Buddhists, is that everything is a manifestation of mind. So you go into yoga with Patanjali, you go into Vedanta with Vedavyas, you go into Samkhya with Kapila, or you go into Buddhism with Shakyamuni, you're going to find this difference between the Eastern and Western perspective. One's thinking in the terms of inception or beginnings and evolution. And those are real. Those are real actual happenings. But Eastern is thinking in terms of those things are the effects of many other causes that happened before them. Say Big Bang and evolution and transformation and all that are all outer effects. That last minute effects, most recent, latest effects of things that are eternal back inside of you. In other words, as I just said, everything is a manifestation of mind. Now, in that manifestation of mind, there are many flavors, many spices, bitter and sweet, pungent and mild and bland. You've got the whole mixture of mind in there. And that's what this is about, this list here. Let me call up my own copy here so I can not crane my neck so much. What are modes of sankalpa? Hope, brooding, seeking, owning, coveting, enjoying, striving, accumulating, clinging, failing to share, taking the unreal as the real, conception, conceiving, thinking, imagining, creating, projecting, fantasizing. You can see there are some very apparently negative things and some very apparently good things, like who wouldn't want to think? Or if a person is not thinking yet, you want to get them thinking. That still doesn't erase the fact that meditation is the doing away with thinking. You get into a good meditation by stopping the mind stream from flowing. Who can deny it? So basically, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, you want to stop the mind from vibrating, but you've already done that after you've mastered your mind. See, you enter into meditation with the six limbs preceding it all mastered, right? You've got to master your posture, but you clearly can't master your posture and sit still until you're a non-violent and truthful and you don't covet things, and so forth and so on. You've engaged and mastered the purification process, socha. You've given up collecting and owning gifts, aparigraha. You've given up coveting in the mind of other people's goods, whether you're an individual or a nation. Very first sloka of the Ishavasya Upanishad says, do not covet the goods of other beings. So hands off. Be satisfied, Shankara says, by what comes to you naturally, by your own deeds. That is, good and bad. They'll all come to you. And you don't want to take the bad out of the quotient at the beginning, because that's going to teach you how to avoid what's negative. You're not ever going to learn how to avoid what's negative unless you experience what is negative. So one person approached Padre Pio once, the famous Catholic monk that was demonstrating the stigmata and so forth. And said, "Oh, I know you're the Christ incarnate. Would you take away my suffering?" And Padre Pio said, "If you knew how important your suffering was to your spiritual life, you wouldn't ask me to take it away." So that's what the yogi does. Patanjali says, you face off against these negativities. That's your path in this day and age. The Kali Yuga gives you plenty of them to face off against. And so does your own mind when it's steeped in ignorance. But as it begins to find a trajectory outward of that ignorance, upwards, which really means inwards, kingdoms of heaven within, then it begins to master the process of thinking. At that time you can begin to think, you begin to sit and think, I must do away with the thoughts of my mind. But in the meantime, you're engaging in what's called sankalpa without even knowing it. Now, one of the earliest mentions of sankalpa is from Lord Krishna in the Gita. And Arjuna wants to know what all of this is before him is all about. And he said, basically it's sankalpa. It's a positive evil. Give it up. So this is what you have to give up if you want to know your formless nature. Give it up is an interesting term, same as renunciation or chagi in Sanskrit. Means at least be able to give it up temporarily. And then once you have the experience of non-duality, you can revisit all of these modes. And you can do them in a yogic lifestyle. So it's sort of like saying, give up all form, not because it's evil and certainly not because it's unreal only, but if you give up form and you'll have your first formless experience, then you can come back to form in a completely transformed way. I hope you got the pun, transformed. So form and formlessness are two modes of consciousness, but you haven't yet seen the ultimate form. Krishna also points that out in the Gita. There's my Purashtaka body, he calls it, my eightfold body outward. It's the 5 elements and body-mind mechanism, basically. And then there's my inward, formless nature, and that's where everything goes after death, after destruction, after so-called annihilation. And that's constantly going out. And when the ignorant soul sees that, he's calling it birth and death, and what's in between is life. But Christ came among the fishermen and he said, let me show you eternal life. You don't have to be born, and you don't have to die, and you do not have to live a conventional life. In fact, those who love their life will lose it. Those who love their life will lose it, but those who hate their life will be giving it again in eternal life. So you have to sort of stand back with an aversion to life in the body only. See, that is, all I am is a cage of bones and flesh, and then I have a brain. But far beyond the brain is the mind. You haven't made the distinction yet between the gross and the subtle body, nor have you made the distinction yet between brain and mind. So your viveka is not really intact yet. You're not really clear, khyati, about things. And so that's a healthy distinction. There are all sorts of unhealthy separations going on, from me and my brother, and from me and other nations, my nation and other nations, and ego and soul. There are all sorts of unhealthy separations going on, but here's a healthy distinction and separation for you. The practice of viveka. It clarifies the silt in the pond. And that takes a long time to settle. So discrimination will help everything that is unclear in your mind, and your brain, by the way, settle nicely and quickly so that you can see your reflection in that pool. Now, the teaching is that you can't get rid of the pool. The mind is always a mixture of good and bad. We think we can purify the mind somehow, you see. But the mind is already pure, if it's called Buddha mind, or original mind, or pure mind. So what about that? So the implication really is that you can't get down in the mind and actually start purifying all that silt. It rises and it falls, it rises and it falls, and that's the nature of manas, dual mind. What you want is a non-dual mind. So that's something that you transcend to get. That's this power of transcendence via discrimination. So that's what Vedanta and Buddhism are pointing to at the practice level of things. Sure, you can go to the Advaita and you can go to the Zen and you can go to these non-dual expressions and say, oh, how marvelous, and pretend like you're there by just simply reading it. But you haven't yet done the distilling process yet that's going to make those your own property. Ram Prasad sings in his songs, I want to become infinitely wealthy with the whole terrain of Mother Wisdom. I don't just want a little piece of it. So he's getting positively greedy. See, he wants the whole thing. He wants to weigh the whole bell fruit, not just the flesh. So that's the kind of soul you find doing an intense spiritual practice. You might be able to start out at a moral level, but the difference between a commandment and a dharmic law is one says thou shalt not kill and the other says thou cannot kill. It's impossible to kill anything that was never born. So, if you have to hear it musically, then you hear Shankara singing. Namrichor na Shanka, Nami Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva, Mama Janmaha. Namrichor, I have no death. Why? Because Janma, I never had a birth. How can an unborn thing die? You started off on the wrong footing, you see. There's birth and death, but there's the unborn, or that from which birth and death sprung from. Everything has to have a cause. At least until you find the causeless cause, or the unstruck sound, then you're going to have to operate under that premise. You can't transcend it. You have to use the Dharma. Vivekananda said, we want to transcend Quran and Bible and Vedas, but not by doing away with them, by synthesizing them and using them, utilizing them, understanding the teachings. So transcendence in the Advaita Vedanta way of looking at it is not just neti neti, not this, not this. It's iti iti, all this, all this. It's just that you can't understand all of this as Brahman, like we just chanted. Vedanta, Siddhanta, Niruktiresha, Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha, Kalam, time, and Jivaha, the living beings, and Jagat, the world, those are all Brahman. But you're walking around seeing the world, as separate from Brahman. You haven't made that move, that inner divine move that coheses everything, integrates everything. And as you do make the synthesis, realize that it was always one in the first place. It's not something you can bring together because it's already in its own innate, pure state. You can't purify the mind by the six-limbed yoga. You can't purify the mind by bowing at the Guru's feet. You can't purify the soul by destroying the mind's waves in meditation. That is, mano vinasham natu naivashudam, guru padesham natu naivashudam. You can't purify the soul, the original mind, because it's pure to begin with. It was before the idea of inception. So, anterior to life and mind is Atman. Nice Advaita Vedanta koan for you. You just take that out of the scripture and say, I will meditate on that until it sinks deep into my thinking conscious. Anterior means before, everything. Anterior to life and mind is Atman. Ever free, never bound, as Vivekananda called it. And guess what? That thou art. So that must mean I don't want to make a separation between me and my Atman. I can't think that way. I am that. So it means I was unborn. I was original. If some great being like Shankara has to come along and put that in a stotram for you and sing it to you, has to come and take a body, which he didn't want to do, and sit before you and compose this and sing it, then the sun is setting in the west. You see, then it's time for you to undertake some sadhana. So Thou shalt not kill, thou cannot kill. That's the difference between morality and dharmic laws. So, and dharma can just stay rattling around in your brain, as Vivekananda said. Where seekest thou that freedom, friend? Neither this nor that can give. In books and temples vain thy search. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. So cease lament and
let go thy hold.
Let go thy hold, yeah. Let go your hold on mundane human convention. Let go your hold on fundamentalist religious precepts which are untenable and unacceptable. Let go your hold on your attachment to emotions, to Zen sickness, to ashobha, emotional state of things, and become your true self again. Do the noble thing. And then radiate that nobility everywhere that you go, like my teacher did when I saw him. We'd never met a man like that. You see, where do you find one in the West? So all of a sudden, saw a man like that. See, we learned to light our torch on him, and it would fizzle out a couple of weeks later, out in our daily life, you see. We'd come back again, light it again. Pretty soon we got the transmission of how to keep your torch lit all the time. And that was done through self-effort. Can't do away with self-effort. Those Advaitists or pseudo-Advaitists out there telling you that you can realize the soul without sadhana, I never saw that in my teachers, Ramakrishna included. If you've already got enlightenment, you still do sadhana as an example for others. What to speak of keeping this dual mind polished, you see. Shankara said, I have to keep my mind polished because even though I'm a realized soul, or he was a realized soul, dust collects on a mirror naturally. If you have a mind and you have to use it, then there are going to be insinuations, superimpositions, sublations. And besides, you're working with the karmas of others at that level, so many of them are going to come. You're going to have to keep polishing that mind every day to keep your vision of God pure and perfect and clear and without blemishes. That's the way you prefer to see reality, right? No matter what you might call it. Allah, Almighty Father, Brahman, Tathagata Garbha, no matter how you might call it, it is always pure, so you must keep it pure. This is why I never get through a scripture very fast, because my commentaries on slokas tend to take off. Okay. But subtle is the point of a goad, pure and effulgent and infinite like the sun. That is that Brahman, or Atman. But assuming another, the size of a thumb, that is like saying right next to the heart is the Atman, the size of a thumb away. Sometimes they call it 5 fingers. So those are symbolic references to that chamber of the heart. They say that the doctors and so forth say that there's actually even an anatomical chamber there in the heart that's empty. They don't know what the function of it is. So it's kind of interesting that there must be a physical facsimile of an actual spiritual principle or truth in the physical body too. Everything works its way into the physical. So this brings me back to the original point. Everything is a manifestation of mind. As Holy Mother said, all these objects are thought made concretized. They're your thought solidified. So you can look at everything and say, it's all Maya. Or you can look at everything and say, it's all intelligence. Or you can look at everything and say, it's all Brahman. And those are 3 very good stages of your process. First, you're lost in Maya. And there's no connecting point. It's all fragmented mind. It's all desire. But then you start integrating and doing the practice, and all of a sudden everything's my own intelligence. And I see that very clearly. It's not atomic particles anymore, congealed by some unseen magical force that's now manifesting as an object in front of me. If I were to look at it that way, then I could definitely call it empty, shunyata. See, oh, it's empty of what? It's empty of substance, and it's empty of the power to fulfill me. Those 2 kinds of clarifications around the word shunyata should lift you off of the conventional meaning of it and help you to ponder the true meaning of emptiness, which to Zen Buddhism is the ultimate. Tibetan Buddhism disagrees, but They all have their own way of explaining. So, even if shunyata is a stage along the way, then you begin to see not only the objects themselves are empty of substance, but the mind that's projecting them is also empty of substance. I mean, this is the way you make your way towards pure mind, which is truly empty. Empty of what? Well, let's say lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame, pride of caste, pride of lineage, fear, doubt. Need I go on? All your playmates at recess, you see, in this world. It's empty of all those. Imagine that state of mind. Imagine the state of mind of a seer, of a sage, of a saint, of an avatut, of an avatar, of Shvetashvatara sitting with his dharmic family. Imagine that state. We must. In fact, better than imagining, we should probably envision it. Because the mind, my teacher used to say, yesterday's imagination is today's envisionment. So you have to start somewhere. So we're an imaginative race, Americans, Westerners, English. If our imagination ends up as, silly cartoons on screens, animated movies and so forth, and that's as far as we go, then, we might as well follow Walt Disney into the great hereafter. But what about these great seers, you see? They got rid of imagining. They even got rid of conception. They got rid of creativity. Why get rid of creativity? Because that's Lord Brahma's function. And you'll someday meet Lord Brahma inside of you, and you'll say to him, as is in the Mundaka or in Kata Upanishad, basically, "Oh, I saw your marvelous creation, Lord Brahma, but here it is, I'm handing it back to you. It's a nice bath, but I'm clean and I want to get out," you see. Or as Vivekananda said, the world is a great gymnasium, but after you flex your muscles and build your body, then you want out of the gymnasium. There's no need to stay there anymore. It means you're not confined there anymore. It doesn't mean that you have to give it all up in the old sense of the word. It means you're not confined anymore. You're free. You're never ever free, never bound. And that's what we must be, because that's who we are. It all follows. So I'm not going to go into the mental moods. You all are familiar with them, I'm sure, and are probably still engaging in some of them every day. I hope you're doing it atmically instead of mayically, because Vashishta comes along later and he gives you the difference between mayic sankalpa and atmic sankalpa. Just read Yoga Vashishta. The seers are using sankalpa in a very positive way, and they probably learned it from Lord Brahma, because his creation is completely sattvic, completely balanced. And the next thing after that is going to be the word Om. That's why Om is painted on Ram's hand, you see. I'm the last form you'll see, because you're going to the Word now. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That was Christ's way of telling the fisherman, go meditate in Gethsemane so you'll understand the cosmic process. Because without cosmology, your philosophy is going to be incomplete. And without philosophy, your spirituality isn't going to be accessible to you. Again, a nice triputi: cosmology, philosophy, and spirituality. I mean, we all get all up in arms nowadays about human races, different races and cultures losing their cosmology, being destroyed by war or by domination or something. But why don't we do something about it? I mean, it doesn't mean we have to fly to Africa and try and restore the lost cosmology of the pygmies or something. We have to realize that these cosmologies are eternal inside of us. The real solution and the best help you can be is to realize the eternity of everything. Not to go and sit with them and brood and cry about their lost cosmology, but say, I have a way out of hell for you. Your cosmology is eternal. So it can be put in terms of the subtle body, how everything goes back there and everything comes forth again. In this world, it might take a few thousand years for it to come back again. So you're playing with time. But in the timeless moment where you meditate, it all comes back in a flash. If you want to dissolve the mind stream, then right now, use a half an hour or even 10 minutes to dissolve earth back into smell, because that's where it came from. And dissolve water back into taste, because that's where it came from. And dissolve fire back into sight, because that's where it came from. And air back into the sense of touch, because that's where it came from. And ether back into the sense of hearing. Aren't we using ether right now in a very positive way? And waves and vrittis and intelligence here and there. So you connect the 5 elements to the 5 senses, and you've made the first step of a meditation called dissolving the mind stream. And then what to do with those senses? Oh, well, tonight in dream I have 5 subtle senses. I see in a dream, I hear, I taste, I touch in a dream. So if I have purified these outer senses here and made them instruments of divine life, then all my dreams become radiant. My teacher used to love that song in India. It says, "A man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. Now all my dreams have become radiant meditations." So there, in 2 sentences, you see, illustrates that teaching so well. Your waking state gets purified, dharmic, pure, peaceful, content, balanced, sattvic, then your dream state will follow. And also the opposite of that. Now we're talking about somebody who's doing the apparent transformation process. Don't get me wrong, there are beings who have coming from the inside out. That is, they bring their perfection with them. And they're the exemplars for those of us who are practicing outward in. Actually, both of those movements have to be mastered, the evolution and involution, and we're stuck in evolution right now in the West. We don't even know there is a way, a place inward to go. We take Christ as our ideal in America, yet we think that maybe his saying, "My Father's mansion has many chambers, or the kingdoms of heaven are within you," is somehow just some cryptic saying he made off the cuff. See, we're not taking that. See, we're taking all the wrong things literally. Eternal hellfire, damnation, and so forth. You see, sober-minded men have become disgusted with their superstitious religions and are looking to India for a new light. The theories of creation out of nothing, a created soul, a big tyrant of a God sitting in a throne in a place called heaven, and eternal hellfires. This is the taking of things that are not meant to be literally. Yet here's a teaching that you should be taking literally, that you're only taking symbolically, or maybe not taking at all. That these kingdoms of heaven within you are lands of your own consciousness, levels of knowledge, akashas, bhumis. How many different words and how many different souls have to come back and tell you that you have a subtle body and a causal body before you give up your death grip on the atomic particle and rise above the physical body? Vivekananda said, there's only one way to prove that you're not matter, and that's by leaving matter alone. So have that experience once in your life. Lift off. There's a satellite station waiting for you. Don't worry. You can connect with it. You can live outside the physical universe like Buddha did and look down on it and see it's inside of a river of time. And he can, at that eternal moment, he can say, oh, there's Christ about to be manifested, and I'm going to set myself down 550 years before him so that I can prepare the way. John the Baptist was the preparer of the way for Christ in his own lifetime, but 550 years before that, Buddha was preparing the way for Christ. And after Christ, he was preparing the way for Shankara 700 years later. So people say there are many avatars that come many times, or there's only one avatar that comes once. But the truth is there are many avatars. There's one avatar that comes many times, see. It's the same soul cut from the cloth of non-duality. Like you take a cookie cutter with dough, you see. Make different shapes of cookies, but they're all the same dough. Clay elephant, clay mouse, they say in Vedanta. Atman is the clay, it's in everything. Gold ornament, gold ring, gold necklace, liquid gold, it's all the same thing, it's just appearing in different forms. So there's so many ways in which they try and convince you, if you need convincing of that. So one of the great teachings then is egotism and sankalpa. If you're engaging in it atmically, then you have the grounds and the wherewithal to do that, and it can be helpful. But if you're stuck in it myically, then look at it and do away with it. Do away with all these positive evils in the name of worldliness, ignorance, greed, gain, lust, and so forth, and give them up. That's renouncing the world. The monks do it outwardly and inwardly, but you have to do it at least inwardly. And then you'll be free to live outwardly the way you want to. And your dreaming and waking state will all of a sudden come together, and you'll know the A and U of Om. Now, make friends with Shiva so you can know the M, you see. Because everyone loves Brahma and Vishnu, but I don't know about Shiva, you see. He's going to bring this all to an end. But he's going to bring it to a welcome end. Saw a road sign along the way, highway. The first person to reach 150 years is now living amongst us. Oh my God. Who'd want to stay 150 years in the body? I don't even know if it's true, but that's what the roadside said. See? It's like one man told another man, "Did you hear that house fell down up the street, that big old house?" And the man said, "I don't believe it, wait here." And he ran away. Came back with a newspaper and said, "It's not in the newspaper, so I don't believe it. You must be lying to me." So, all right, fine, go look for yourself if what I'm saying is true. Look inside. Dissolve the mind stream. See what you see. There's no such thing as nothing. Nothing doesn't exist. One of the Vedantic physicists I know has that on his t-shirt. Nothing doesn't exist. No such thing as nothing. There's always something. In fact, everything is, would be a better way of putting it. You can put it in the neti-neti way, nothing doesn't exist. You can also put it in the iti-iti way, everything is. Punyata, shunyata. It doesn't matter. It really amounts to the same thing. That thou art. Try and connect it to you now. There are some things that the ego is not good for. But this is one thing that the ego will be good for. You ripen it and connect it personally to you. I'm not supposed to own all of this. You see, I'm not supposed to possess all of this. Even knowledge is not supposed to be my own. But the Atman's mine. Forever. So discrimination at a very high level. You're going to be contemplating the difference between pleasure and pain and life and death and so forth. But you should also start contemplating the distinction between form and formlessness and the distinction between liberation and bondage. These are very high dualities, and there's a back door out of them too. Beyond form and formlessness is the eternal form. Beyond bondage and liberation is eternal freedom. Don't get stuck in the dualities, no matter how subtle they are. Render them into one indivisible state. Antaram va. See, kalam antaram va. We say, Om drishyam pratitam pravilabhayan san matram ananlaganam vibhavayam samahitas san antir antaram va. Antar is outer and the inner. Render them into one indivisible state. And then meditate on that state, pass your time contentedly and be free. Who wrote that? Who composed that sloka? Shankaracharya. So, are the scriptures useless then to me now? I just need to take that one sloka out, understand it, meditate on it, and I'm free. The scriptures did it. A record of an illumined soul, like Shvetashvatara, who put it down. So when he says sankalpa, and he echoes it back to the ancient Vashishta, who was one of the 10 mind-born children of Lord Brahma, so he should know about the sankalpa process, because Brahma is the ultimate master of sankalpa. He's one of the sons 10 mind-born sons of Lord Brahma. So he's telling you, Sankalpa, you should probably listen. Start to discriminate about what's kind of Sankalpa you want to do away with and what Sankalpa you want to keep. Let's go on to Sloka 8. Well, actually, the only thing to say about this is that Vasishtha says, if you want to know what this ends in, it ends in, number 1, desire for physical objects, number 2, desire for mental projection, and 3, desire for attainment, which is at the worldly, mental, and intellectual levels. That's another Triputi to ponder. And so Sankalpa happens at all those 3 levels. That is, you want food, sense objects, pleasures, possessions, and so forth, then you're pretty much talking about the worldly. If you're looking for worlds, for heavens, afterlife, for excitements and distractions, then you're talking about pleasing the mind in its search for duality. And then desire for attainments, for power, for manipulation, for pride, and for glory. Vainglory, they call it in Tantra. Nice word. Then you're talking about the intellect gets a hold of all this, the unripe intellect, that is, and begins to project all those things in space and time. If you have a whole collective mind doing that, then you've got what's called worlds. Worlds of the ancestors, worlds of the humans, worlds of the celestials. Let's read the 2 quotes and then finish with this teaching. Sankalpa is desire at 3 levels, world, mind, and intellect. When utilized by an unillumined mind, it is a detrimental force at the root of all suffering. It is like a rutting elephant whose trunk is the tendency for selfish grasping, and who goes about spraying the world with the water of surface enjoyments. Only the sharp arrow of Atmagyan can bring this lumbering beast to its knees, so it can be bound by the ropes of masterful mind control. Then he says, for mastery over Sankalpa and Vikalpa, practice Asamvedana, non-receptivity to desire. Instead of falling in love with your desires as if they were fulfilling, you must instead begin to perceive them as burdens, like packages and parcels filled with unwanted items that really clutter your life and only weigh you down. So non-receptivity to desire means a train's coming at you and you just step aside, basically. There are 9 different ways of trying to fulfill desire. 3 are impossible. And the other 6 are gradated. Some people, yes, the monks, they can root out desire by the very root and tear it out without damaging themselves. But most of us follow that sublimation method. You see, over time we'll get over our desires. We'll fulfill ourselves in gradated stages. Sublimation means bringing that energy up the spine slowly. It's a beautiful word in English. We don't have many like it. And then, of course, you can fulfill desires, but you cannot fulfill desires in the world. You have to fulfill them in the Dharma, which Buddha's Eightfold Path makes very clear. There are certain ways that you can fulfill desires. Otherwise, sort of like trying to satiate the elephant. Keep him from grasping bananas and peanuts and various things out there in his world. And then he's going to spray you with the water, too. He's going to infect you with his disease. So a good way of saying, Asamvedana is one of the more subtle ways of understanding freedom from desire. That is neither repression, nor is it the slow sublimation method, but it's just standing aside. It's like becoming invisible. You can't shoot a ghost. See, bullets go right through him, evidently. So you become that transparent. A teaching on Sankalpa and Vikalpa, as is mentioned in Sloka 7. Let's go to Sloka 8. That individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint, divided and subdivided hundreds of times. Yet it is potentially infinite. It has to be known. So we can look at another new warhorse. It's about lokas, nadis, and transmigration of souls. We saw this chart on the last visit as I composed it just recently. Let's make a jump here, though, and let's read 4-5 slokas in a row, because it applies to this chart. It is neither female nor male nor neuter. Whatever body it assumes, it becomes identified with that. By desire, contact, sight, and delusion, the embodied soul assumes successfully various forms in various places according to its deeds, just as the body grows nourished by showers of food and drink. The embodied soul chooses many forms, gross and subtle, based on the qualities belonging to itself, to the actions, and to the mind. The cause of their combination is found to be still another. Realizing that is without beginning and end, who creates the cosmos in the midst of chaos, who assumes many forms, and who alone envelops everything, one becomes free from all fetters. That brings us up to the penultimate sloka of chapter 5. So 3 or 4 or 5 slokas on something that we know nothing about in the West and don't believe anything in reincarnation. Now, Dalai Lama has come amongst us and said, if you want to solve all your problems at the emotional level, for instance, which the West is now steeping themselves in, emotional level of things, then you must study karma and reincarnation. You can't really be a Buddhist unless you know about karma and reincarnation. Yet we don't even believe in it. We're still thinking our Western psychology, our Western medicine, our Western teachings, our Western upbringing, our Western religion based in one lifetime scenario. How are we ever going to make sense of everything that's happened to us and all of our samskaras and all of our karmas? Time to break out of that box, punch our way out of that wet paper bag, and start to believe in this idea of reincarnation and karma. Believe in it how? As a relative law. Because the soul is never incarnated, and it's never born, it never dies. We can't contradict the teachings, you see. So we have to make sure that we leave Brahman pure and perfect as it is, and then talk about the mind in a different breath. The mind that engages in all of this is a transmigrating soul. That's the purpose of this chart, is to talk about the transmigrations of souls, but also the lokas it attends and the nadis it moves through. Nadi is the key yogic word, tantric word, Vedantic word. They all borrow it. Nadi means nerve. So if you look at the human body and you're a doctor, and you're not looking at just the skin, hope you're not just a dermatologist, I hope, you see, in that case. And then so you look through the skin and you see the network of nerves, and they say you could tie those together and they'll reach from here to New York. But the many nerves that are in your subtle body will reach from here to Vaikuntha if you tie them together, you see. So you've got a subtle body consisting of nerves too, and those nerves are hundreds and thousands, like we just read. In the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each of those 100 more, and in each of those 72,000 others. You can't put it together yet that that's how the soul leaves the body? That is, the transmigrating soul leaves the body through subtle nerves? So there's a first huge step in understanding reincarnation and karma, and the answer to your question you've been asking for far too many centuries about where do souls go and where do they come from. First we have to say, the soul doesn't come and go. I'll quote you Vivekananda's saying, coming and going is all pure nonsense. Where is the time which the soul will come when all of time is in the soul? And where is the space to which the soul will go when all of space is in the soul? You're running around inside of yourself, you see, in a dream. Gaudapada, Shankara's teacher, said, a runner runs a race in a dream, gets food, gets water, sees clouds, perspires, wakes up on his bed a little later. He's not sweating at all. He's still hungry, he's still thirsty, but he's never left his bed. In the Gaudapada Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad, this is how he explains it. You're all running a race in a dream. We're all in this big dream of the cosmic collective and individual mind, and we're not going anywhere. Coming and going is all nonsense. So where is that coming and going taking place? First, it's taking place apparently, and we're dreaming it. Sankalpa style. And how we're dreaming it is through these thousands and hundreds and thousands of nerves that connect us to gross to subtle and from subtle to causal. Take a look. 7 chakras. 3 below, 1 in the middle, 3 above is how the song, the stotram, sings it. I can play for you if you want. So 3 below means the bursts of return. You see, there's the path of the sun and there's the path of the moon. The 2 great paths, Krishna says in the Gita. So coming and going with your ancestors is all taking place in these 3 lower chakras through many, many networks of nerves. Basically, the lowest chakra connects there to the myriad worlds of ignorance, Maya. So does the 2nd chakra, and the 3rd chakra particularly connects there because that's where ancestors live. And they don't know anything higher than heaven. So if you have an ideology or a religion that's teaching you that heaven is the highest place, then you know why the Vedantists are saying, I don't care for heaven. It's one of the first things my teacher told me. A Vedantist does not care for heaven. We believe in liberation right now, in this very moment. I'll have my freedom right now, thank you, not in a post-mortem emancipation. I don't believe in a post-mortem emancipation. I can hear him saying that right now, echoing in the chambers of my mind. I don't believe in a post-mortem emancipation. See? Big, gruff voice in this little tiny body. So he was there to state the truth. He was like Vivekananda's son, like a lion of Vedanta, roaring out this truth for you, impressing it into you. Get rid of all those sankalpas and vikalpas that you're entertaining and take on these great truths. Ponder those. Well, there are 3 great granthis, you see. Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, Rudra Granthi. Those are, the way I've come up to explain those in English is subtle membranes. Like squishy stuff, you see. Like if you're cutting open a body, you'll encounter lots of different squishy stuff. You see. If you go through an ocean, you'll encounter lots of seaweed and things you have to cut through. Well, in the subtle body, there's these granthis, or subtle membranes, and they keep the ancestors in the ancestor realm. And if you want to ascend to the 4th chakra, you're going to have to penetrate through this Vishnu Granthi. What to speak of leaving the realm of the animals and the disembodied spirits. To get through to that root chakra, you're a human. Root chakra has poisons, yes, but it also has nectars. Each of these chakras has poisons and nectars. The poison up here is disorientation. You get to the formless level and you don't know where the hell you are, see. And so you have to acclimatize yourself there. Like hiking up to the top of a mountain, you're without oxygen. So the poison at the 3rd eye center is disorientation, is the danger. You have to have a guide, you have to have teachings, and you have to forbear. It's the same down here when you're dying. If you're reading the Tibetan book over a dying body of a Tibetan man, then and the women and children are crying, you have to say, leave the room. And they ask, why leave the room? Because he'll hear you weeping. But he's dead. No, he has subtle senses. He's listening to them when I read the Book of the Dead to him. He's hovering over his body still, as it were. So I'll now read the Tibetan Book of the Dead to him and guide him through the dying process. Very fortunate if you have that boon. Of course, better if you had have practiced it and mastered it on your own in life with a preceptor, a living preceptor, but it has to wait till the time of death. Very fortunate to have someone guide you through that process, because when you meditated on connecting earth with smell and water with taste and fire with sight, right? Now you have an attachment between those, and death is separating you from earth, air, fire, water, and ether. And if you become attached to them, it's very painful. Therefore, death is painful. Holy Mother said that. Birth and death, very painful. May you never have to come here again, she said. So at least we know her opinion of manifesting the body. At least out of ignorance. If you manifest out of knowledge, then you wait till the fetus is developed and then project your soul into it just before it comes out. You don't get involved in the gestation process, which is a great suffering. There are stotrams and poems and songs about being caught in the womb I could sing you some. So, poisons and nectars in all of these. So, using the poisons, getting rid of the nectars, to the Tibetan Buddhists, that means winds, pranas. They call them winds. You purify the lust with the wind of and anger, see, with its opposite, the wind of its opposite. And the same as you march up the chakras, each of them contains a certain passion, and you have to bring in a certain pranic wind. So the whole thing is powered by prana. It's just that when it comes here, it starts to become Shakti. Prana and Shakti are really the same thing, just in a more refined or a less refined way. So if you get a hold of the prana, as yoga wants you to do, via the breathing process, I mean, that's in Zen, that's in Tibetan Buddhism, that's in Vedanta, that's in Hinduism, the breathing process, they do it in different ways and advise you to practice it in different ways, but basically what it is doing is making you aware that I breathe, I live, I am. And there's an energy that does not, that by which you live, not by bread alone, as Christ said. You do not live by bread alone. You live by another energy. Remember, Brahman isn't an energy. So you have to keep it free and clear of all those kinds of ideas of movement. So you have to go to the prana next and see that that's moving everything. It's animating everything. It's causing me to lift my arm and speak and you to hear. It's the power of the ears to hear and the power of the eyes to see. That's manned by prana. See? Brought to you by prana. See? It's the subtle billboard inside of you, along the side of all these roads. So as you ascend, then you encounter this Vishnu Granthi, and that's the hardest thing to penetrate, you see, to get to the heart chakra. If you get there, you're called a devotee, and if you can call yourself a devotee, fine. You have your salvation. Your liberation is still waiting, though. You've gotten over the idea of bondage and liberation, and then you'll get your liberation. In the meantime, you still say, I'm a devotee of the Lord. I'm still depending on the Lord. I still believe in Ishtam, but I haven't seen the Ishtam dissolve inside of me yet, because it is a concept in a very powerful way of my own thinking process, of the thinking process of billions of souls, Ishvara and human beings, indivisible. One thing. On this side is that myriad world of beings wandering in ignorance. Some of them are the Burloka, the Bhuvar Loka, and the Swar Loka. You see the angels here, you see the ancestors here, and you see the world here from space, taken by our own Hubble bubble telescope. That's Ramakrishna is saying. So now, penetrate the Vishnu Granthi and you'll find these other four worlds, which are the worlds of no return. You're on the path of the sun, and you're encountering the fourth chakra, fifth chakra, and sixth chakra. Seventh isn't really a chakra, but they put it up there anyway. It's not a center, it's everywhere. So these teachings, because we only have 5 minutes or so before our break, let's end the break with some of these beautiful quotes. Here it says, within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness with its many openings, shaped like a calyx of a lotus, in which all the universes exist. So there's more to the idea of the lotus than just a flower. You see, it's sort of a symbolic flower. It's actually shaped like the calyx of a lotus with openings. So they actually perceive this inside when they ascend. Inward ascension, they call it. Oh, and here's this sloka here that we just read. That individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint, divided and subdivided hundreds of times. What a marvelous mechanism the human being is, even on a physical level. But if you add in these other worlds, these other subtle bodies and causal bodies, then it's stupendous to contemplate the human being. And how could you not worship the human being now? See, when Vivekananda came here, he said, "Oh, I see you haven't learned in the West that God, that that the human being is just God walking around on two legs. And then he followed that up by saying, where else will you find God here? Up in the sky? A big, soul sitting on a throne somewhere? You're it. It's the cosmic game of tag. You're it. Now go find the granny. Get free. Bathe at that most sacred confluence of holy rivers found within the precious human body where the three spiritual nerve channels meet. Here's the three. 1, 2, 3, wrapping around it. So from the Muladhara to the Sahasrara, or just short of the Sahasrara in this Rudra Granthi that's so hard to penetrate, you've got these three rivers, the confluence of the most sacred rivers in the world. You don't need to go to the source of the Ganges, that may help. What you need to go is go inside and connect with these three streams. See? And go right up the middle using the prana and the Shakti power that wraps around him, the Muladhara. Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, right? So if you're in the West, you could call them the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Columbus discovered America in those three ships. But now you have to discover the new America, see, with these three ships, as it were. These three subways, these three vessels, these three rivers, these three streams of consciousness. Those quotes selected from different Upanishads. Other teachings exist on this chart. We will take them after the break, so let's take 5, 10, 15 minutes here. Live streaming audience can look at these charts while we're away. So thank you for your kind attentions. Namaste. We welcome back everyone here, the dozen or 14 of us, and the also 6 or 8 in the Hawaii Sangha at live streaming, and also people looking on their computers as we take up the Vedantic teachings for one more hour today, this weekend. Next weekend we'll be on retreat, remember, but the following weekend we'll be back here looking in probably chapter 6 of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. So if you're not following the text and you want to kind of acquaint yourself with what's coming, a lot of beautiful teachings in chapter 6, the concluding chapter. You can pick up the text in our library or at any Ramakrishna bookstore and begin to look into it. This is Chagishananda's. I just saw a picture of him upstairs in the book that one of my friends and students gave me at the break from India. I brought it from India, and Chagishananda's sitting on his mother's lap as a little boy. And so there are mothers in India giving rise to vice presidents and presidents of spiritual orders in the midst of suffering and hard circumstances like Holy Mother lived through. So it's an amazing thing to look at a picture or to hear a word in that sensitive mindset that one gets into when one seeks the truth of existence. Let us continue on or finish up this chart, because we could really go on for with a long time, but I'll probably bring it back in other classes in the future. There are some 250 to 300 of these charts I've created now so that we can have visuals, because the Westerner is visually oriented and audibly oriented. So the visionary is seeing the light and the audible is hearing the sound. So that's Jyoti and Shabda, respectively. The two kinds of temperaments, really, of a person when they get inside. They either relate to Om, the humming of the sound of a billion bumblebees, or they will see visions. And basically that's psychic and mystic kind of division there. Not that the two can't be shared or mixed with one another, but it is noted by the seers that a lot of beings proceed by that. So hearing in our tradition is the subtlest of all senses. It goes with ether. And ether is the subtlest of all elements. So to hear the truth is an important thing. Even if you've heard it 1,000 times, they say, you'll hear it one day, one time, one thing, in such a way that it'll break through that curtain of nescience, which, by the way, you can see here on this chart in a sort of gradated way. All this backdrop has many, many thousands of channel waves, but then I've created some channel waves that are more obvious. Some of them, as we left off at the first half, saying go to these higher worlds of non-return, Krishna calls them. Those who seek Brahman and realize in their this lifetime, to any extent, the existence of the Atman and identify with it, they follow the path of no return. Path of the sun, if you will. And no return means no return in ignorance, because remember, you can still return on the path of no return, just like you can do action in inaction. And that's really connected, or one of the points, that you're not accumulating any residue of karma. One of the definitions for my teacher's name, Asheshanandaji, would be the bliss of having no residue at the end of life. So living in such a way that you don't accumulate any effects that will pull you down, like the brick tied to the mongoose tail, pulls him down out of the hole in the wall. If the children catch him once, he's hard to catch. And then they tie a brick to his tail because they know he's so slippery. Then that will pull him down out of the hole in the wall, and they can keep him as a pet. So Sri Ramakrishna used that village story for beings who had the brick of karma on their tail. They can get to heaven and enjoy an existence of some happiness and contentment and more pleasure than pain kind of idea of heaven. But then that karma weight will pull them back down into the body, even against their own will. So to cut off all bonds, or as Vivekananda said, and we chanted it yesterday morning at meditation, strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker baser ore. So bonds of good lead you to heaven, and bonds of negativity lead you to hell, as it were, or the sunken grounds, they call them. This earth can actually become a sunken ground, as you might have noticed. There are some animals that are living heavenly existences here, and some humans that are living as worse than beasts. So it's very relative and fluctuates a lot, depending on the nature or the quality of one's consciousness. Any question you ask me or ask any guru, that's the pat answer. It all depends on the quality of your consciousness. Things can shift inside of the scope of that answer in so many ways and in such degrees. So refine one's consciousness if you want to know the truth and be set free. And this is what Shvetashvatara is trying to bring to us, and why I created a chart like this for this series of slokas in chapter 5, because it's all about rebirth. And we know this, we looked at this last week in Hawaii, any of you who are live streaming, is a very current Divine Mother way of putting it. This is Sharda Devi in her young life pictured here, and how she talked about embodiment and how souls go through it in various ways. We can look a little bit at that, although we did research it pretty deeply last week in Hawaii. At that class, or I mean the week before that in Hawaii, and a little bit in San Francisco last week. But back to this chart on your right, other things to say about it. We mentioned the 3 granthis and how subtle it is when one comes to the Rudra Granthi to try and get beyond this center of seership into the area of formlessness, but to speak of dwelling here at the level of wisdom and here at the level of devotion. As I looked at the picture of Swami Twagishanand upstairs, the quote underneath by him was that Bhakti is not the result of karma. Bhakti is a boon from God. So maybe that explains why some people have it and some people don't. They have this natural innate love and devotion for God, which really smooths the path out for them. Even if they're on the path of knowledge or meditation, Bhakti will smooth the way. And the father of yoga concurs, although he doesn't mention in all of those many sutras of the different padas of the Raja Yoga Sutras, he only mentions the personal God maybe once or twice, Ishvara, and calls him a very, very special soul, a kind of archetypical soul or primeval soul that's watching over things. And it's not necessary, as we know, to believe in God to enter into yogic practice. In fact, sometimes it could act as a downright detriment or weight. Nevertheless, as one practices yoga, one will come in contact with the Son of the Father and get to the Father through the Son in some way. As I put it, you need friends in high places, especially on the spiritual journey. So that's, you might say, a vote for both God with form and God beyond form. And that's actually sort of what you're engaging in here when you transcend the lower chakras and get into the higher chakras. You're coming closer and closer to your true nature, which is essentially formless, like Brahman. You can see other little teachings there. There's the Gyanakasha, it's like an ocean of wisdom. On the other hand, there are ocean of sorrowless light here, Patanjali calls it. That is one of the ways, one of the 7 ways to refine your consciousness by meditating on the ocean of sorrowless light, according to Patanjali. Here's an ocean of occult light. We were just talking about that at the break, how some people, they move towards the occult, and that's a pranic energy. Sri Ramakrishna called it the tricks of prana, and he wasn't interested in that. He would say trying to amass the occult powers is like collecting crow droppings from along the side of the road. So he was really very much against it, as was Krishna is in the Gita. He says you cannot realize God if you even have one of the occult powers. So there again, we wonder why some of these teachers, or so-called teachers nowadays, are encouraging people to attain the occult powers. They're definitely, as far as this chart is concerned, a detriment that keeps one below the Vishnu Granthi and in the worlds of becoming. I was in Ashland last weekend, passing through on the way to a prison where I teach nearby there, and of course in the window was Shakespeare. It's all Shakespeare in Ashland, right? the quote, to be or not to be. And I said, that's not the question. The question is, doesn't come up. You are pure being. So from time immemorial, it seems like we've been asking the question, does God exist or does he not exist? But in India, from the very get-go, they've been saying God is existence, and therefore skirting this duality that's present about the existence of reality. Or, as we were saying, everything is. Nothing is not. Nothing doesn't exist. So a chart like this, or a schematic like this, of the gross, subtle, and causal body is very valuable to us to see. It will fill in some gaps in our thinking process and help us to understand esoteric sayings and teachings like kings of heaven are within you and so forth. You can imagine the stunned nature of John and other of Christ's apostles who, when they heard words like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. What is this Word, O Lord? And became pretty much the foundation for Christianity. Genesis, it's called. But Christ didn't want his religion based on Genesis. He wanted it based on I and my Father are one. And if he even wanted a religion at all, crafted after him, so he would have had it that non-duality or Advaita would be at the foundation, because that was his nature. He had already seen seek the kingdom of heaven within you. He'd already seen that level of cosmic being. Then when he saw it, he said, birds have nests and foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here. So this is a sojourning point, earth, body, mind mechanism. And one needs to use that temporarily as a foundation or an anchor. You see, that's where this has a nectar associated with it. Kundalini rests here, doesn't she? She's coiled as that Kundalini power. So there's a great potential in the root chakra. It's not like, oh, you're just an animal if you exist there. It's just that that's the potential for you. The tendency is downgoing, because that's the symbol there, you see. And then you find these other lotus having more petals, means more worlds and more worlds and more worlds inside these nadis connect to. So lokas and nadis, it's always been known in India and passed on to Tibet in 700 or so, and it went on to China and into Japan eventually. And they began to understand these multitude of beings, where they come from, where they go, and the various worlds that they attend upon, and therefore flesh out the whole picture of their cosmology, and build the philosophy strongly upon that. The philosophy really comes from I and my Father are one, the non-dual, no worlds, no nadis, no vibrations, and then burgeons out. So if we talk about dissolving the mind stream, but we can also project the mind stream, right? The projection, we have to be very careful in terms of projecting, but that's happening at the behest of the Trinity. So if you were in Brahman and you are an avatar, which means that which descends, then you're going to be coming down, you see, into, or out would be a better way of saying it, out into the worlds of name and form. You will pass through Om, and Om has a double aperture, 2 petals, and you see then one's going out and one's going in. One's producing form, one's dissolving form. You'll find this exact equivalent for that physically in the black holes that they're discovering now, sucked in and coming out. So as they look into systems like that, or metaphors, and they're finding correlatives in all of the bodies. The yogis have found those, and they understand prana and tanmatras and things like that, which in the West we haven't begun to ponder yet. So there's not only esoteric and mystical and ecstatic reasons to contemplate these, but also very practical reasons. They enrich your life. They remove fear and doubt, which is the curtain of nations. which is not really pictured on this chart, it's on a different chart, but curtain of nescience is made up of fear, doubt, and ignorance. And that expands when you brood on it and contracts when you stop brooding on it. So stop brooding and having fear, get rid of your fear by knowledge, get rid of your doubts, and stop brooding on, and definitely destroy the ignorance in the mind, and then thin that curtain out and begin to see that light shining or hear that sound emanating and follow it. Ramakrishna said you follow, you get out of the car or the carriage, you see, and you hear a distant sound rumbling. So over sand dune after sand dune you're marching on. Finally you break over the last sand dune and there's the ocean. So you hear the sound first from a distance, but there's still these sand dunes of doubt, fear, ignorance, and reticence and all of that in you. But as you come closer and closer over those those final sand dunes, the roar gets so loud that you can't doubt it anymore. So pretty soon you break over and you see sailboats and children and beaches and waves, and you know you're there. So that coming upon the word which was in the beginning and which was with God and which was God is that aperture. And if the soul is coming out of Brahman into that, the next thing it will see is the Trinity. And then the soul's going in, the Trinity is the last thing they'll see. So this constant double stream of consciousness, you see, inwards and outwards, evolution, involution, if we want to say that, is happening. There's another double stream of consciousness that's flowing into this ocean here, the ocean of ignorance, called samsara pragbara and koivaya pragbara, souls that are getting out beyond this Vishnu Granti, and souls that are still stuck in it. Samsara pragbara is a stream of souls that are constantly getting reborn. So they're going into birth and death in ignorance and coming back in ignorance, never knowing the free, ever-free nature of their existence and their soul. Soul with a capital S, Atman we call. Soul with a small s is mind. One transmigrates, the other doesn't. One conceptualizes and so forth, and the other is free from that. Or one does it consciously and one does it unconsciously. These are dualities to ponder. Give up pleasure, pain, and virtue and vice and so forth. Ponder the higher dualities. Again, much more there to see on that chart. Usually this chart leads to other charts. There's Kailas, Manidvipa, Vaikuntha. The idea being here is that the highest lands of the Vaishnavas and the Shaivites and the Shaktas, as well as the realms of Buddha and the realms of Christ, are not non-different. The soul will move into them under the auspice of that Ishtam, or that chosen ideal that it just chosen. If you're a Shakta in India, but you could also choose Shaivism or Vaishnavism or Ganapacha or Suryaism, Saurism, then you choose one, the other four get behind that one. It's not like the other four go away. See, you just concentrate on one and the other support that. That's the universal ideal anyway. But in other places we're thinking, one religion has to outdo the other or outstrip the other, or my watch keeps the only right time and the others don't, as Ramakrishna said. So the idea of universality, which is different than eclecticism or ecumenism, or certainly different than fundamental and way different than materialism, is that these religions are all indigenous to your soul. There is no such thing as a foreign religion. So, for instance, the Muslim religion, we better start taking it seriously and embrace it. It's the new kid on the block, for one thing. And the new kid on the block has something to contribute. So why our founder became an Islamic sheikh, Nur al-Jarahi, Lex Hickson in other words. It was a very serious sadhana in the Muslim religion, selected by Sheikh Musafir Effendi to represent that Sufi tradition, the Jarahi tradition, here in the West, along with one woman, a man and a woman to select. So he was selected out of the whole American firmament to represent this path. And we used to ask him about it, and he'd say, because we have to make bridges, or there are many millions of Sufis, Muslims out there, and they're upon us too. So this kind of interreligious harmony is very dear to the heart. And it's understood if you understand unity first. Unity first, then harmony. We can't make harmony. We can't make peace. It's eternal. It starts as eternal peace and unity, and it turns into harmony. But as it trickles down these worlds and people misunderstand it, it becomes disharmonious. And that disharmony is most manifested in a world of souls who do not know their true natures. When they came out of Brahman, if they did, we hope to say they are coming out of Brahman, and they move through the Trinity and they move down to the realm of the ancestors and so forth, they don't bring with them the knowledge of their true nature, or that one essential piece of knowledge that I do not transmigrate. A parinama. There is no such thing as transformation. That's all in Maya. That's all in nature. It is not happening in my soul. That's the one essential, maybe one of two pillars. And the second pillar in Hinduism is I'm never born and I never die, Adhyatma. So non-transformation and non-birth, non-death are two pillars that are very connected, and they make sense out of the reincarnation and karma process. Otherwise, you would just think of yourself as a continually transmigrating soul, and you'd never know the truth of Shiva. You see, you never know that everything is eternally stable. It does not move. The soul is not moved, and it's not subject to time, space, and causality. Nama, Rupa, Desha, Kala, Nimitta do not occur for it. It is in them. It exists in them. Nature exists in you, in other words. It's not a separate reality. Which was the one contention with the Samkhya philosophy early, that Prakriti and Purusha were two separate realities, and how can there be two separate realities, they said later. But Samkhya nevertheless had a very powerful lesson to teach about cause and effect, which has been there in Buddhism and Yoga and Vedanta ever since. It's been a very powerful teaching. So when you hear Lord Kapil's name in India, you salute, because Zen Buddhists say, gas ho, the two become one, you see, because he's the first man who did his homework, at least on historical record. And he showed us the cosmos. We wouldn't have known the cosmos, that is the non-self, how amazingly diverse it was. And if we hadn't have known it, we would not be able to dissolve it. See, fear is gotten rid of by knowledge. Nahi gyanena sadrishyam Nahi gyanena sadrishyam pavitramiha vidyate. As Krishna says in the Gita. There's only one purifier, the greatest of all. It's knowledge. Gets rid of your ignorance. So, thorn in your flesh, take another thorn from the same bush, take it out, throw them both away. Get rid of your ignorance with knowledge. They both come from the same bush. And then transcend them both. Go beyond the golden iron chain and realize your true nature, and live in that true nature from then on. All of that is really very much a tantric teaching, yet it's coming out of a Vedantic scripture. That's why those are the two great streams in India, Veda and Tantra. And they've been, who knows which was first. The idea is probably Tantra was first, as an indigenous peoples along the Indus River. They're doing some excavations now about that, and coming up with statues of Pasupati, which is the ancient form of Shiva, and mother worship images too. Very possible they lived along that Indus River before the Vedic incursion, which is a peaceful incursion, and then you had this beautiful blend of Tantra and Vedanta, heart and mind, if you want to say, or your Bhakti and your Jnanam. And they both had a deep understanding of the word, Om. It's there in all the Tantras, and it's there in all the Vedas. And of course, it was going to appear in Buddhism, Om Mane Padme Hum, Dalai Lama's mantra. Or it's going to appear there in yoga too, as the mention of japa in the sutras, once or twice. Japa is a very powerful practice. It's also key to all religions. You find that mantra or japa practice in all religions. So, filling in our knowledge with a rather tantric teaching, nonetheless, comes from this sloka, which we said, chapter 5, sloka 8. Now, the next slokas that we will finish up this half with were all about embodiment. Whatever body it assumes, sloka 9. Assumes successfully various forms, sloka 10. The embodied self chooses many forms, sloka 11. Realizing that one who creates the cosmos in the midst of chaos and who assumes many forms, in sloka 12. So all 4 or 5 of those slokas mention assuming form. The word assumption, thank God we have it in English, or we would actually mistake that for being the form. But assumption or assuming is a very good name, good word. Another good word is non-actual. The process is non-actual. There's no evolution going on that's real, because transformation does not take place in Brahman, and Brahman is the only existence. So anytime you see things changing, mutability, so forth, tangibility, transformation, you have to stand back and say, oh, isn't Maya working beautifully today? And isn't it good that I can see it from a witness standpoint and not get sucked into it as so many souls do? That I can remain in Kaivalya, freedom, and stay out of the stream of samsara. Thank you, Divine Mother, for keeping me free, and may it always be so. I mean, that's always the great prayer of the highest beings. You ask Sita, she gets a boon. She says, may I never become enchanted by the world bewitching Maya. Ramakrishna used that same prayer in present-day time. So they always want pure love, pure devotion, pure knowledge, but if I had another boon to add in there, it would be, may I never be enchanted by the world bewitching Maya. How many billions of souls are and have no idea of anything beyond? So this is an example of what lies beyond as far as the Tantra system. What I mean by Tantra in this way is Kundalini Yoga. There is a Veda, an Upanishad in a Veda called the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad. So you know very well in these ancient Upanishads that they were pondering the ancient tantric teachings, that Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and Shakti, and Ganapati were all important to them, that Advaita was the essence of the fruit, but they were also looking at all these concomitants of the philosophy as aids and helps. You get to the Father through the Son idea. Now, this is actually already in a book, in the Kundalini, in the Reclaiming Kundalini book I just put out. It's our most recent SRV book. If you want to see this chart and several others, it's actually there if you want to study it more closely. There are other little insights and illustrations in that. And I could have gone on and on, except there's only so much space on an 8x11. Now, just quickly here, I don't want to go through this chart extensively because we did it recently at class live streaming, but there, in a summation, there's the 3 bodies, in case you don't know what your other 2 bodies consist of. We know pretty much earth, air, fire, water, and ether. We know marrow, bone, flesh, blood, and phlegm, and skin, and nails. And we know that we speak, we handle, we move, we excrete, and we procreate. Those are called the karmendriyas. All of that Shankara puts in the realm of the physical body, or the stula sharira it's called. The sukshma sharira, or the subtle body, intellect, ego, thought, and mind, you could really stop there, but what do those engage in? The tanmatras are there, and we don't know the tanmatras. Audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor. We never think about what we're tasting or what we're seeing or what makes us see or what makes us hear. We just sort of take it for granted that that's some property of the senses, but we know the senses are 5 horses connected to the chariot of the mind, you see. That representation has it wrong, by the way. It should be 5 horses pulling the chariot. So we know that those 5 horses are connected to the mind, which is the chariot, and the will is Arjuna, and then the Purusha is Krishna. So we have that as a metaphor to think about. But also we have the actual five senses of knowledge that connect with that. Audibility connects with smell, with seeing. With hearing. Tangibility with feeling. Visibility with seeing. Flavor and odor connect with smelling and tasting. So those are a part of your subtle body. In other words, if you're looking for your subtle senses, those will connect you inward to your dream state. And then the five modes of life force. The most important thing for us right now about the subtle body is, number one, knowing that the mind is fourfold and what those four elements are. Number two, that there's five subtle powers called tanmatras there. And number three, that there's prana. And prana isn't just your breathing, your lungs breathing in and out. It's the fact, it's what's making the lungs breathe. It's not just your heart pumping, it's what's causing the heart to pump, and so forth. So you have these five kinds of prana, and when you come to know them, the yogi thinks, how marvelous, there's a prana moving upwards. I think I'll grab that. And when he grabs that up-moving prana, he's never depressed ever again. He's never bored ever again. I can attest to that. So you always are then, your mind is always rising. Aspiration, see. So it's like your in-breath. It's an up-moving force. Now, down-moving force, does that mean it's all depression? No, you can actually come down with it and give those teachings to others. You just have to make sure that you know the kumbhaka in between, how to sustain. So your breathing process, Rechaka, Puraka, Kumbhaka, and another kumbhaka at the end of it is very, very significant of spiritual things. It connects with the AUM of Om, connects with your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state. You make these connections and ponder them, then all of a sudden the philosophy becomes clear to you, and you're beyond cosmology and into philosophy then. You know where it all came from in the mind of the seers, how they put it together, how they fathomed it, because it was already one to begin with. The thing to know about the causal body? Probably nothing, because nothing's there except unmanifested Prakriti. It's where everything came from. It's formless form. It's formless matter would be probably the best idea of putting. It's where everything goes. Your baby comes out of it, and then your grandfather goes back into it. It's not being born and it's not dying. It's coming out of unmanifested Prakriti, playing a while and dissolving back into unmanifested Prakriti, which is what the ocean is telling you all the time when you look at it. Many waves being born, sporting, and dissolving in one ocean that never changes. So you can connect that back to the five elements of nature too, if you study an ocean. But here's some things, as rare as they are, that I found in the scriptures about your causal body. It's an undifferentiated state, indeterminate state, anandaganam, a mass of pure conscious awareness. The intellect ceases to vibrate there. The mind exists there only in a subtle state, not in a gross state. It's like the condition of your deep sleep. It's where the gunas finally rest, even sattva, at least temporarily. And it pre-exists the physical worlds, and I think most importantly it's the cause of these other two bodies. That they say the mind can produce as many bodies as it wants. But that's esoteric knowledge. The real first point is that the mind does produce bodies, with the help of nature, of course. But if all of this is my own intelligence, then I'm also producing my own bodies out of my thinking process. So much so that I can do it even before I die from the last body. And that can happen ignorantly and with wisdom. There are people who are living old age and not dying out of their bodies because they're still waiting for their next body to form. That is, they want to know where they're going before they let loose of their last body. That's in ignorance. But the seer is living in this body as if it doesn't even exist in the first place, and is looking at the next body as if it doesn't exist either, that I'm not moving anywhere, I'm just assuming. There's that word again, I'm assuming forms in the illusion of time, and watching the illusion of life and death move in appearances only. So producing bodies is the mind's penchant. And not just human bodies, space with planetary bodies also come out. All the suns are in you. Billions of suns are in you. And if you were to meditate on them, you see that those are particles in a great ocean of light, of sun. And it's just like, then you find the particle of intelligence, the jnana matra. If you were to split one of those, you'd have a huge implosion, just like if you split an atom outwardly, you have a huge explosion. But an implosion is what you want. You don't want to split the curtain of atomic particles for the destruction of everyone. You want to split the curtain of Maya for the illumination of everyone. So, split those atomic particles. Grab a hold of one of them. It's called sampragyata samadhi in its savichara form. That is, first I get overwhelmed by all the suns of knowledge in me. Then I have to come out of that shock state, jhata samadhi, and select one, pull it in, split it, and see what's in it. Guess what comes from that? Bliss. That's why they're so damn blissful. Where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both, sing high that note. So they've been able to get a hold of that and pierce it, you see. And their whole preoccupation after that just becomes splitting atoms of knowledge inside. You can spend your whole lifetime doing that, what to speak of many lifetimes, and also many lifetimes that don't really exist, because you're just in eternal life. The bodies are add-ons and takeaways. Even that's only apparent. So I think that's the most important part of your subtle body, is that it's the cause of your causal body. It's the cause of your subtle and gross bodies. You can read these quotes yourself in that book called Sri Sharda Vijnana Gita, which we put out. All the quotes she has there about the process of embodiment have been incorporated on this chart. So something in the nature of karma, reincarnation, and embodiment in this class, always a topic that we need to entertain, even though it's, again, an apparent or non-actual phenomena. It's very key to us until we understand its workings, and then we can let it go and live as unborn beings. Now, in the remaining time, here are some golden rules for sadhana for us. Of all the charts I've showed, this is always one of the most popular amongst all of you, because it's sort of a checklist. You see it here. You check all these things off and then note the points. Then sadhana becomes a matter of guidance followed by practice, and then the realization that follows. It destroys lots of age-old doubts in the mind. And, of course, all of this is in accord with these slokas that we just took. The last sloka of this chapter, 5, which we will then finish this chapter in this series of weekend classes, says, "That supreme divinity who created both life and matter, who is the source of all arts and sciences, who can be intuited by a pure and devoted mind, devoted to sadhana, realizing that, the blissful and incorporeal and nameless, one is freed from further embodiment." So the previous 4 slokas were all about the process of embodiment. Here's a sloka about freedom from embodiment to those who are engaged in sadhana. So we should look at some golden rules for sadhana. And that first quote says, "In order to benefit by sadhana, which is spiritual practice, 2 great points are to be reflected upon at the outset. First, it is helpful to know that spiritual practice will not net you freedom or enlightenment, which is more a matter of grace married to right timing. Freedom is indigenous to the soul. Thus transformation is in and of the mind, not of the self, which does not require any regimen of purification. Second, all effort is to be accomplished as a mental practice first and foremost, rather than merely physically, since the origin of delusion lies in the mind, not in the body. So to get at the seat of delusion or ignorance, or negative karma and mixed karma, or the adherence to even good karma, transcending heaven and so forth, we have to get to the mind to find those sources for those effects. There you see a nice list. Samyak Darshana might as well be one of the eightfold path of Buddha, the fourth noble truth. It's similar in name, although of course this is Sanskrit and they use the Pali derivative in Buddhism, but nonetheless it's all has to do with view and attitude, or what we call perspective. If you enter into a sadhana with a certain perspective, we hope it would be non-dual. It's called Advaita Vedanta sadhana, knowing the self is already pure and perfect, but the mind still has some cloudiness along these passageways. You see, still some confusion happening in the process of reaching every day, moment by moment, that pure light of understanding and living in it. It's a very high ideal. So this preeminent view or attitude, you have a checklist for it. First, Sandilya Vidya means identification with the source while keeping relations with the world. They say you can be in the world but not of it, so forth. Or Sri Ramakrishna said the turtle swims in the ocean but its mind is always on its eggs buried in the sand. He has a whole bunch of stories like that. Put the boat in the water but don't let water in the boat. The duck swims in the water but water doesn't get into the duck, and so forth. So he's got this whole series of stories. The mudfish swims in the mud but its scales still shine. So that's the idea. It's not that you are the world or that you want to try and build nests and holes like birds and foxes, but you want to live in the world a divine life, a dharmic life. So check that in your checklist, that you always keep identification with the source. The source could be studied and reflected upon through meditating on the causal body, for instance, because now you know this is not the self yet, but you know that it's very definitely pointing towards a pure open space. An open space that's beyond religion, and it's also beyond sadhana, as this quote says. You're not going to get enlightenment by your practice, but you are going to get a pure mind by the practice, and that pure mind will then naturally see the Atman. That's the way Holy Mother describes it. Purify your mind of doubts, fears, brooding, ignorance, curtain of nescience, and then the self will appear to you naturally. So you never purify the self. You just work sadhana on the mind until it becomes so clear that, like a mountain lake, you can see perfect the sky, the trees, and yourself in it. A second checklist, on the list would be Artha Shunya, clear comprehension of the nature of motiveless practice. That's karma yoga for you, and there are some good 6-8 major points in the karma yoga teaching that Krishna gives in the Gita about how to do action and remain free of the effects by not grabbing onto the fruit. So your practice must be that way too. It doesn't have any motive to it, because then the ego gets in and rides it and so forth. It has to be as pure and perfect as the source is itself. And that's a perspective you adopt. What I'm suggesting here is that if you master your physical posture, that's all well and good. But there are many mental postures in your mind, mental asanas, that you're going to have to master. Manasana. And in fact, if you do those first, you'd probably just sit down like this. You'd never have to do any Hatha Yoga. Because I never saw Dalai Lama or Karmapa or my teacher do any Hatha Yoga or heard of them doing any. We're just coming down from a pure mind and sitting naturally. This posture opens up that root chakra naturally. And there are immediately physical ramifications to that, and then later on metaphysical ramifications to it, and eventually purifying ramifications to it. So just this very posture itself, the tripod, the trikona, is a very powerful position to assume. Samasti Chitta is next. Have a grounded and unalterable stance of open-mindedness. I was talking earlier about universality being a principle whose time has come. Ecumenism, that's getting all the same limbs of one tree together. You see, trying to get all the forms of Christianity together and agree on something, or all the forms of Buddhism together and agree on something. It's not going to happen probably. So they all have different ways of thinking. So ecumenism is only, the adherence of my own religion in different forms. And then if you talk about eclecticism, you're saying, well, I love all religions, but I have not practiced one yet. I've dug many shallow wells, but I've never dug a deep well. So you haven't gotten to that universal or universality yet that is epitomized so well in Sri Ramakrishna. The universality of all religions, the motherhood of God. Those are two very important things that Sri Ramakrishna brings to us in this day and age. So, if ecumenism and eclecticism can't do it, then there must be something called universality, whose time has come. We need to start thinking about that. All religions are indigenous to your soul, and they all have something to give. A couple of the popes championed that. They said, one of them said, we have to become friendly to our brother and sister religions. So that was a beginning towards tolerance, they say, but far beyond tolerance is real understanding, Gandhi said. Just to tolerate something is not that great a virtue. You have to actually champion the other religion and see what's in it and get the essence out of it, which is precisely what you saw Sri Ramakrishna doing when he took all the pictures of Kali out of his room and went to the Muslim quarter of the temple and practiced Muslim religion under Govinda Rai until he got the essence and had his vision of Muhammad. See? And his vision of Christ under the Christian regime and so forth. So and Holy Mother said about him later, was he trying to prove the universality of all religions? I never saw him doing that. He just loved God so much that he wanted to experience God through every possible way. So it wasn't like he was out to prove something. How you prove something that's already true? So Advaitists will always think that way. They always think in terms of integration, natural integration or synthesis, not bringing things together. Call that Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta. Natural integration, rather than Prati Tantra Siddhanta, where you're trying to bring all the religions together and prove that they're somehow one. You see, nobody's going to agree on that. Get a Roshi and a Rinpoche and a priest and a father and a Swami and a Tulku and in one room and they'll agree upon certain things, and that's probably what you should concentrate on. What did they agree upon? Because that'll clarify my mind for me. That'll cook my dish. I need to cook my dish first before I can cook others. Fourth in that list of 6, alaya vijnana, positive and natural idea of universality. So you have to have that as an ideal, and then you have to ground yourself in it, is what these two mean. Also, prayojana, profound underlying sense of ultimate purpose. Sometimes they call that waking up in the morning. You've already set up your meditation last night. I will go there in the morning, I'll sit and I'll have a perfect meditation. So it's not like, let's see what happens, you see. But you've all set it up nicely for you, just like you're setting up your next birth if you're an illumined soul. And you might have already chose the parents. So you have this unalterable stance, and it's preconceived, it's precognitized. See, it's not something that's left to chance or something that you're going to, like a postmortem emancipation, that you're going to get later or hope to get later. So you set it up early, predetermined, they say, and your underlying sense of purpose is based on that. And then Autsukya Puraka, ready store of interest and inspiration. That's also a part of a spiritual life. We call that, it's upeksha, and it's nice and equanimous, you see. But then you have to have this utsaha, it's called in Sanskrit. Not excitement, but anticipation, not just anticipation, but enthusiasm. That's a good English word. So you have to be enthused about your spiritual practice. It's got to live. You can hardly wait to see God in your next meditation. See? And you're going to have to do that before you can see God everywhere, which is the last word in spiritual life. But in the meantime, you have to encounter Him deep inside of your own meditation. That's a good checklist for Advaita Vedanta sadhana. That special sadhana that an advanced soul will want to entertain and check off like that. And there are sentinels at the gate which are very helpful too. Don't have any pretensions, don't make any justifications, don't have any complaints about your present status. That's not you, in other words. You're not your mind, intellect, body. You are the Atman, whether you know it or not. The whole purpose is to become aware of it and then live in it. Abide in the Atman, we say it in Vedanta. There are books called that. Abiding in the Atman. So, it would be like saying Sahana Bhavatu, maybe not find any fault with the teachings or with the world or with others. In fact, Holy Mother said, learn to look into your own faults. That was her last message on when she went, before she went into Samadhi. The whole world is your own. Do not find fault with others. Learn to look into your own faults instead. So she had those words on her lips for us at the end of that embodied existence. Second is no shifting of blame to any external circumstance or outer agent. In other words, you can't say the devil made me do it. The Advaitic judge will not accept that in the court of the cosmos. Say, sorry, you must go back to prison. The prison house of the world. This is all you're doing. It's all your sankalpa. And you got yourself into it and you have to get yourself out. If you have to go to an avatar, which you'll have to wait 4 or 5 lifetimes for that because he only comes every 500 years, then maybe, see, like Ravana got himself killed by Ram because he knew he'd never get over his evil propensities. That's to take a lot of advanced planning and you have to wait a long time and suffer a lot for that. But what we're proposing here is that you just face your demons and eradicate them and become a living liberated soul, Jivan Mukta, or a Buddha in this lifetime. Become a yogi in 6 months, as Vivekananda said. So don't propose that blame on outer agents. Create an incarnate devil and put it on that. Or worse than that, blame it on God, because God has nothing to do with your mess here. God is not in the world, Vivekananda said. The world is in God. So you're going to have to talk about perspectives, your views or attitudes. You're going to have to do a 2% shift on your mind to start looking at things a little differently than your conventional upbringing or your conventional religion has foisted upon you and on your parents and on their parents before them and so forth, back to the ancestors. So you're going to want to take this refreshing view, you see. In fact, one of the apostles of Christ said it nicely. No one has ever seen God. So it means God is not in a form. God is not the form. So you keep that part of divine reality as it is, formless and pure, and you rise to it. You don't try and pull it down to the world, to your comfort zones. That is the tendency of most people, to try and bring God into the world. Not going to work. Oil and water don't mix. Do I have to get the cylinder out and shake it for you? That's how we teach the children. They mix for about 45 seconds, which for you might as well be 45 lifetimes, to find out that nature and soul never mix. They only associate. And therefore, Patanjali comes along and says, oh, I see the problem in this age. The seer has become identified with the seen. So let's give you a checklist and tell you again how to separate that process, separate the soul from nature, because one's sentient and one's insentient. And until you can make that division, you're mixing things up in unholy ways sometimes. So get clear. Get the clear, straight transmission. So to follow it up, that next sentinel at the gate is no assigning of fault to any deity such as God, gods, demons, or devil. To go on, no citing of the occurrence of luck with regard to the outcomes of one's life. So Vedanta and those systems do not believe in luck or serendipitousness or any other of the words we're beginning to apply to the cosmic process, which is just all a matter of karma, good, bad, and mixed. So put away your lucky rabbit's foot and get out the beads and start doing your japa. Get a practice that isn't dependent on gods and demons and devils, which are all inside of you, by the way. They're not outside, you might have noticed. And also, don't leave anything in the realm of chance. If you got up this morning to come to my class and your car wouldn't start and you said that was just the way God wanted it, I'm going to say no. You just forgot to put gas last night. You're not planning ahead. You weren't mindful, you see. So serendipitousness is not a favorite principle of the Vedantas. No vague or foggy belief in the randomness or serendipitous nature of things and events would be putting a capper on it. Then, penultimately, no excuses or inadvertence around one's supposed inadequacy for accomplishing sadhana. That is laziness, weakness, lack of capacity, and you put yourself into that category and you're just pretty much fattening up your weakness, your samskara for weakness. But you should be saying, I am the Atman, ever free, never bound. I am birthless, I am deathless, I am timeless, I am causeless, I am spaceless. And I can realize that in this lifetime. Utsaha again, enthusiasm for the path. Refreshing yourself again, being reborn every minute, every day, and generating that truth principle in you all the time. Don't take a refuge in my inadequacy. I am weak. I am lowly, and so forth. And of course, you're not going to take refuge in money and goods either, because Kailash sings to you, Nam ajapane kyun chor diya Ramanam Japane kyun chor diya Rama Namo japane kyun nor diya. So why are you busy putting all of this energy into matter, into money, and into luck and all of those things? Instead, don't you know that Ram is the owner of the entire universe? If you just worship him, he will grant everything to you. Seek thee first the kingdom of heaven, and all else will add unto thee. See? So shift your priorities, shift your concentration, shift your attention away from the weeds to the flowers, or to the flower, the lotus. See, one by one, and assume that position and graduate up and out. No reliance upon false refuge in ignorance, unpreparedness, unworthiness, or poor upbringing. I could go into each one of those as separate excuses that people bring to me when they come and say why I can't commit, or why I can't do practice, or why I don't want to follow a path, or why I'm shifting from one guru to the other, going to one teacher to another in wild fox Zen fashion, when I should be staying with one teacher only until I get my realization. So the two that stick out the most are this idea of being unworthy, which is really a property of the ego, isn't it? The ego on one end is saying, I'm too good for this teaching, to practice. And the other end is saying, I'm not worthy for this practice. See? So those are the two poles of this rascal ego, ahamkara. Refine that to pakvahamkara or apakvahamkara. Do the stages, and then get the ego out of the way and enter in with all enthusiasm into that practice. Get your freedom. Attain your Buddhahood. The other is unpreparedness, because who's ever prepared for this, really? Who's ever prepared for enlightenment? Basically, it catches everyone by surprise. sometimes by grace, sometimes in a dream, sometimes in a waking state. I'd be riding a bicycle race, one of my students said, and all of a sudden everything stopped, and it was just as clear as a bell for 5 or 10 seconds, this divine reality and everything. And then it passes and bicycles are going on toward the goal again. A very nice metaphor to hear about this circular race we're running with no finish line. You have to get outside of the whole circle. So unworthiness, unpreparedness, don't worry about that. I used to say, as a professional cellist, joining symphonies, and I was a protege cellist here and winning all the scholarships here in Portland area, going to various places early on, and took me around the world on tours and stuff. If I had waited till I was a perfect cellist, I would have never taught a soul, the cello. No such thing as perfection. The artist suffers that at first, but finally realizes it. No such thing as perfection here. Or everything is perfect in its imperfection, if you want to put it another way. You just learn to abide with it, just like you abide in your Atman. So unpreparedness and all that, you learn as you teach. That's why they call that beginner's mind, Zen mind, beginner's mind. You're always fresh students, you're always new, you're always opening to this. If you called Sri Ramakrishna a master or father or guru, he would not like those words. They all prick my flesh, he says. And the reason is because he was always learning. He was always gaining more experience in the realm of samadhi. They were unbounded. My gosh, he had so many samadhis that the scholars of India couldn't find them in the scriptures. Trying to look in their scriptures to find out the samadhi that Ramakrishna described. Some of them they could find, others were just off the map. He was off the map. His nature was samadhi. It's the third thing, along with mother, power, and university of all religions, he's bringing to us. The third thing is that have samadhi. It's your true nature. We haven't seen a man have samadhi for a long time in the eyes of humanity, right in front of everyone. It's been a while since we've really seen that. And Ramana Maharshi came afterwards, so it's like a further afterthought of that samadhi happening in him. All right, so we have reached the end, have we? 2 minutes, I see. So we won't go into the initial purification or transformation of mind maybe until Saturday after this coming Saturday, because as I said, we will not be broadcasting live stream next week. We'll be on retreat, when you're welcome to entertain coming to that too, and join us there for intensification of sadhana. So with that said then, let's end here with our final chant, just on time. Om Bhadram Karnabhihi Shrinayama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Stirai Rangayesh Tushtuvam Sastanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayo. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual, and may we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting, and may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other souls. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.